Hey, this is Jamey with Stonemaier Games, and today I'm going to share my opinions and my favorite mechanisms in the top 10 games ranked in the world, according to BoardGameGeek users. So BoardGameGeek is, as you know, if you're probably watching this, it's a great community for people who play board games, and there's a ranking system based on people who rate the games on BoardGameGeek, and BoardGameGeek has a secret formula determining the rankings of those games. So it's largely a gauge of how much people enjoy games. So these are presumably the 10 games that people enjoy the most. And I'm going to go through them one by one. I actually don't own any of these games, but I've played all of them, some of them multiple times, others only a few times. And I'll share my brief opinions and my favorite mechanism in the game. I'll start with 10. 10 right now is Great Western Trail. And Scythe, one of my games, was in the top 10 for a while. Now it's just below it at 11. So it's kind of a good time to do this list since none of these games are my games or Stonemaier games. So Great Western Trail by one of my favorite designers, Alexander Pfister. I love in this game the movement system and the kind of the hand management and deck building system in it. I've seen deck building used in many different ways, but I haven't really seen it used in a hand management way in the same way that it is in Great Western Trail, because you're using your hand of cows to move throughout the board to get to the end of the board to then drop off some of those cows and move forward in terms of the points that you score in the game. But I just love that system of how you're using your hand, how you're gathering cows, which cows you're gathering to determine like how well you're going to be able to move and how valuable those cards are going to be at the end of each round. And that the rounds are determined by you. The game doesn't have a set number of rounds. You determine the rounds by the pace at which you move throughout the Great Western Trail to get to the end of the trail. It's been a while since I played this one, and one of the reasons that I don't return to it all that often is that there are a number of rules that I end up that I kind of struggle to remember with this game. There's a lot going on with it. It's a fairly heavy game, and there's certain systems in the game that require a bit of a game manager, I think, to help players remember to do them, and a number of rules that are a little bit hard to remember, at least for me. I think if I played it all the time, that would not be a problem. But it's one of these games that I struggle to get to the table because every time I play, I feel like I have to relearn a significant amount of it. So yeah, actually, I wonder if I could do like a ranking of how I would rank these games in terms of my enjoyment. This would probably be near the top, but yeah, that's almost a different list. So Gaia Project is number 9. Gaia Project is the spiritual successor of one of my favorite games of all time, Terra Mystica. And I'm one of maybe the rare people who love Terra Mystica more than Gaia Project. I think I love the theme more of Terra Mystica and almost the simplicity of certain mechanisms. But I think Gaia Project is kind of maybe the better designed game. Just one of those rare things like Clank in Space, where I enjoy the original more. I think it's more fun than the revised version that has technically like better game mechanisms. But the thing Gaia Project that I really love are the tracks, the tech tracks that you can move up to gain instant bonuses, to improve your ongoing abilities. I think those are so much fun to move up, so gratifying to kind of choose which tracks you're going to focus on and which tracks you're not going to focus on, kind of like I did in Tapestry. But I think that's my favorite mechanism in Gaia Project. My number 8 game is one that I've only played once. This was, I think, the number 1 game for a long time on BoardGameGeek, and that is Twilight Struggle. Twilight Struggle is a 2-player game where you are you're fighting against your opponent in terms of really, I'm going to describe this very poorly, but well, I'll describe my experience with it, which was a very fast game where I played, I believe it was Russia or the USSR, and I lost within 45 minutes, which, as you may know, is a very, very fast way to lose Twilight Struggle. And I just had fewer points than my opponent. They reached a certain threshold that they needed to reach, and they instantly won the game. But I love the card play in Twilight Struggle. I think I like it more in the 2-player game Watergate, but I love the idea that each card is benefiting you, but also potentially benefiting your opponent. And I think that at its core is awesome. I love that idea that every card I play has an impact on me and my opponent. And that I think is the core element of Twilight Struggle that I really, really enjoy. The reason that I haven't returned to it is it's a really text heavy game. Like the sheet that tells me what I can do in my turn is so text heavy. I think maybe a modern version of this game would integrate that much better into the interface of the game. And honestly, I can't think of a circumstance where I would rather play Twilight Struggle over Watergate. Watergate is everything that I love about Twilight Struggle, but distilled and simplified, and it has that push and pull mechanism, the tug of war mechanism that I love. So it's one of those things where I appreciate how good of a game Twilight Struggle is, but I think Watergate does it better, so I'd rather play that. My number 7, or not my number 7 game, but the number 7 ranked game is Star Wars Rebellion. This is another 2-player game. In fact, there's quite a few games on this list that I think are almost best at 2-player or only played at 2-player. But Star Wars Rebellion is an epic game of the Imperial forces in Star Wars fighting against the Rebels. I love the different endgame conditions in this game. It's been a while since I played it, but I believe that the Imperial forces need to find the Rebel base and destroy it. And the Rebels need to, I think they just need to outlast the Imperial forces. There might be an instant win condition, but I think generally they just need to outlast them. I like those different win conditions. And there's a track on the board that I really like. I like that actually there are 2 tracks. One is production. So as you're like producing things, you can see how close they're getting ready to being made. So it's kind of this, you see this element of this resource of time in the game of how long is it going to take me to complete this certain ship that I really need. I also love the hidden aspect. I love that both sides feel very different. The Rebels, you are trying not to reveal where you are, but the Imperial forces are finding out more information turn after turn. Also, I like the feel of the game, the thematic feel that the Rebels are so small and weak compared to the Imperial forces, but they're much more nimble compared to the Imperial forces. While the Imperial forces they have so much, but they have so little information compared to the Rebel forces. So this asymmetry, I think, is my favorite element of the game, along with the tracks on either side of the board. There's the production track, and there's the kind of another version of the time track where the Rebels are trying to just outlast the Imperial forces. It's a very long game. I think this is one, like, I prefer my 2-player games to be more on the shorter side. But I did enjoy, I played this maybe 2 or 3 times. It's been a long time since I played it, but it was fun to kind of just sit down and have an epic struggle with one of my favorite themes in any game, which is Star Wars. The number 6 game on the list is one that I've only played one time, and that is Twilight Imperium 4th Edition. Impressive, actually, that the 4th Edition has worked its way onto this list so quickly. I've only played this once because I generally don't enjoy really long games. It's not like that I don't enjoy them, actually. It's just that I would rather play a couple 2-hour games than one 5 to 7 hour game. I had a pretty good experience with my first play of Twilight Imperium, though. We kind of learned it on the fly, or I learned it on the fly. There were people there that really knew what they were doing, but I was fine not knowing everything, going into it and playing it without knowing how everything worked. The game lasted about 5 hours, but it didn't really feel like that. It generally flew by. It still felt like a longer game, but it flew by in general. And honestly, based on my one play, I don't quite remember my favorite mechanism in it, but I'll say asymmetry again, because I do really appreciate the level of asymmetry in the game that goes beyond just like abilities, but each faction had their own entire set of cards that was unique to them. It's a lot of information to parse while you're playing the game, but I can see why people can return to it over and over again and get new experiences every time they play. Because there is so much asymmetry in the game and so much interaction in the game, so many interactions between players, and not just like military interactions, but also social interactions. You're constantly negotiating with other players to figure out if you're going to use some of their technology, if you want to work with them, if you want to stay on opposite sides of the galaxy as them. So I had a good time with it. It's just not a game that I would return to very often because of the length. That's Twilight Imperium, the number 6 game. Ranked on BoardGameGeek. The number 5 game is Through the Ages. Now, this is one that I really need to return to on the app because I found my one and only play of it to be very, very fiddly in terms of how I would track all these tokens and move them around. The thing that I really enjoyed about the game, though, is the card kind of stacking, and I guess it's more of a replacement system in this one. I often confuse, I think, the card system with Nations, which has a very similar card system. But you have this long row of cards. You have a bunch of cards that you can pick from. And when you gain a card, it often replaces a current card in your tableau, but it often does it better. It gives you more resources, or more income than the previous card that was there. So you have this constant sense of progression, and you have a lot of agency over what that progression is because the cards are face up on the table that you're choosing from. And you're adding them to your tableau. I think I prefer Nations slightly. I think Nations is a little bit more streamlined and a little less fiddly than Through the Ages, and it still has that awesome card mechanism. But I've heard such great things about the Through the Ages app and how it streamlines gameplay, makes it much faster. It takes care of all that fiddly stuff for you that I really need to give that a try. That's Through the Ages, the number 5 game on this list. Number 4 is Brass Birmingham. This one has been skyrocketing up the top 10 list. It's currently at number 4, and it might continue to move higher. It's kind of starting to bump against Terraforming Mars, which is incredible. This is a heavy economic game at its best, and it's heavy, and yet the rules aren't actually that difficult to understand. The thing that I really love about this game is actually two things. One is the positive player interaction. You are creating resources on the board that other players will use, and you are often happy that they're using them because once they clear your little tile of resources, you can then flip it over. I think that's awesome. I love positive player interaction in games. I also think it's really clever in Brass Birmingham and in Brass in general that the game has not two sides. You're not actually flipping the board over, but it has two halves really, where you're playing one game for a little while, and then you reach a certain point in time where you start playing a different game. Where I believe it's been a while since I played, but I think the rivers matter early on, and then the rivers stop mattering, and the railroads start mattering, something like that. It's been a little while since I played it because it is a little heavy for my taste for economic games. But I do really enjoy those positive player interactions, and I enjoy that aspect of the game evolving from one half to the other without completely forcing you to relearn all the rules of the game. That's Brass Birmingham, the number 4 game on the BoardGameGeek Top 10. The number 3 game on this list is Terraforming Mars. This is probably my favorite game on this list. I really do love Terraforming Mars. And I need to play the app. I've heard the app is fantastic. But Terraforming Mars, I mean, you probably know how it plays, but I love a couple things about the game that I think are wonderful. I love the progression of the income that you're getting. I love that you're feeling more and more powerful as you're getting income throughout the game. I love playing with the draft variant. I love being able to draft cards in the game, and I love that you have to actually just pay to even just keep the cards in your hand. So even though you might pick some great cards, you're constantly choosing between what cards can you afford to keep this turn, and for the rest of the game to keep them, to draft them and keep them, versus the resources that you need this round to improve your income so that you can do powerful things and have that income for the rest of the game. I think that's a wonderful choice. I love how that same choice is made also in Isle of Cats without the engine building. Isle of Cats doesn't have the same engine building that Terraforming Mars has. But I also love that players control the not really the pace of the game, but the progression of the game, because all the victory conditions, or not the victory conditions, but the progress of the game is determined by the actual terraforming of Mars. So you're kind of working together to terraform Mars, even though you are very much competing against one another in terms of points. I really, really love that. And there's other things that I love about this game. There's a lot of awesome mechanisms in this game. I think this is another one on this list that I haven't played in a while, and for really no good reason. This is a game that I'm always happy to play. Maybe it lasts a little bit longer than I typically would play games. My plays of it have veered up to 3 hours. I prefer the 2.5 hour slot, but perhaps that's probably why. My game nights usually last 2.5 hours instead of 3 hours. But this is a wonderful game. I love Terraforming Mars, and yeah, just fantastic game. The number 2 game on the list is Pandemic Legacy Season 1. I'm actually a little bit more of a Season 2 fan because of the different paths you can take in Season 2. But Pandemic Legacy Season 1 had some of the most memorable moments that I've ever had in games, in any game. And I think I don't want to spoil anything, but I can't not say that that's my favorite mechanism, that it created these huge memorable moments that I'll never forget that I had with my friends as I was playing this game. And that I think it has to do more with the linear narrative of Season 1, where the game basically told us a story, and along the way we changed the shape of the world. Whereas in season 2, the narrative was largely ours, and I really enjoyed that from a gameplay perspective, but it also led to slightly less memorable moments because the narrative was determined by us instead of the game itself. So I think the narrative of Pandemic Legacy Season 1 was its strongest point for me. That's the number 2 game on the list. And finally, the number 1 game, Gloomhaven. This has had the number 1 spot for a couple of years now. Congratulations to Isaac for pulling that off. Gloomhaven is a weird game on this list for me because my favorite mechanism in the game it has nothing to do with the tactical combat, which is such a big part of the game. I'm not really a fan of tactical combat in general. I think Gloomhaven does tactical combat extremely well, but it's just not something that I enjoy. However, I love the story of Gloomhaven. I love the road events and the city events in particular. I think they're incredibly well written. I think they give players really great memorable moments and little stories to tell throughout the game as they have these road encounters and these city encounters. And I really love the design of that. I think I probably didn't express that enough in my original video expressing my favorite mechanism in Gloomhaven. Because I think I was a little jaded. I was expecting something different when I backed the original Kickstarter campaign compared to the game that I actually got. Because at the time, maybe I didn't realize just how much it was focused on the tactical combat instead of these interesting decisions that you can make outside of the combat, on the road, in the city, the types of things that you're going to buy along the way. I think those are awesome, interesting decisions in the game, and I just love the thematic immersion. I also think just the world building in Gloomhaven is fantastic. That Isaac didn't take... I think he learned from fantasy tropes, but he didn't make another version of Tolkien, of Middle-earth, as many people associate fantasy with. Isaac made his own world and his own characters, his own races in that world, and I think the immersion of that is really wonderful. I also love the map in Gloomhaven. That was a big actual inspiration for Charterstone for me. The idea that you could have this city, like I was fascinated by this city map. I wanted to spend so much time in this city going around the different shops. I wanted to live in that city for a while. That inspired Charterstone to a big part, and it has inspired even another game that I'm working on as well. So that's Gloomhaven, the number 1 game on the list. Yeah, that's the top 10. I'd love to hear your thoughts on your favorite aspects of the different games in the top 10. Even though I have expressed opinions here a little bit, I don't want this, like with all things with this channel, I'm not looking for you to bash on any of these games. That's not the point of this at all. You're welcome to, so I'd rather you focus on your favorite things about these games. But if you also want to talk a little bit about maybe why you do or don't get certain of these games to the table as often as you'd like, I'm happy to hear that. I think that can be some interesting things for discussion in the comments below. All right, thanks.